You are now listening to the Counterflow Podcast, a place for dissonant voices and unapproved opinions.
You get split in fucking half, but I call him the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lorditis. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Here is your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back once again to the Counterflow Podcast. Great to have you with me for yet another week. I'm really happy to bring you this episode because think about this, the United States Congress. We all are fairly aware, I think, of how many unimpressive people make up the U.S. Congress for a litany of reasons. One of the things that upsets me often when I see them, the members of Congress on TV, how ancient they look. And these decrepit-looking old human beings have way too much power over things that affect my life. And I don't like that. But it's not just the age, although that's a part of it. They're so out of touch, it's ridiculous. But they're obviously power-hungry, money-hungry. They're backed by big money from credit card companies, big banks, weapons manufacturers. We all know that. And that completely steers their view on non-intervention. They're not for non-intervention, are they? They're for intervening overseas. They're not pro-peace, they're pro-war. And it gets frustrating. And then I meet someone running for the United States Congress out of New Hampshire as a Republican. And that is my guest today, Bruce Fenton. You're going to find this guy inspiring, refreshing, really good, I think. And he's in the line of, you can call it the Ron Paul Republican camp. That's what he's in. Obviously, extremely libertarian leaning, but he values winning. He understands that to win the position he would like to get, he's got to run as a Republican. It seems like pretty simple math, doesn't it? But we're going to get into that today. He's steeped in knowledge of Bitcoin and crypto and a lot of things in that nature. We're going to get into the economy, to this central bank digital currency stuff that's happening. He's got a very refreshing and good take on that and where we're going, where we're headed, and why he's running to represent New Hampshire in the United States Congress. I think we need more good people in there. I think you would agree too. And so I hope you enjoy this interview. Bruce Fenton, welcome to the show, sir. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's jump in with an intro for you. You're big in the Bitcoin world, but now you're jumping into some new waters. So kind of give my audience a brief intro on you, what you do, who you are, and what you're aiming at right now.
Sure. So I've been in the securities business and finance my whole life for almost 30 years. And I've been registered as an investment advisor, SEC registered broker. We own an SEC registered broker dealer, and I've done that for a long time. And kind of you name it, I've done it retail and institutional. I've worked with very small investors and some of the biggest investors in the world. And then I got into Bitcoin about 8 or 9 years ago, and I've been in it full time for over 8 years now. And then more recently, I decided to run for United States Senate representing New Hampshire. So that's been something that's my latest project, keeping me busy.
United States Senate. We need more people like you in there. So you're running. But first, you have to get through the primary, correct? So you're in the Republican Party primary.
Yes, yeah. I'm really a Ron Paul Republican, a libertarian. And like a lot of libertarians, the Republican Party is the best place to run for most libertarians. I think there should be more libertarian Democrats, and I'd like to see more of a libertarian Democrat movement as well. But I'm running for the Republican nomination, and if I win that, then I'll go on to face Senator Maggie Hassan, who's the incumbent in New Hampshire.
Okay, how many people are in this primary race with you? Total.
There's 3 others so far.
3 others.
And I've been in for 2 weeks, and it's a real solid 4-person race. There was no clear front runner really, and me being in it makes it anybody's game. So it's very, very winnable. And New Hampshire's a small state, and there's not very many primary voters, so it doesn't take that many votes to win. So it's very, very winnable. And then if I win it, whoever wins it has a very, very good chance of winning in the general election as well.
Okay. Do you know your opponents well at all? Or are they names around? You don't even have to say it. I don't want to give them advertising, but are they names known in your area?
Not really.
Okay.
There's a state senator, a former town manager, and a retired general. They're all great Americans, good folks. But we do have strong ideological differences. Me being
Okay.
the biggest difference, me being much more on the libertarian side for sure.
Okay. You said something in already here that I wanted to get into with you. Running as a Republican, you said you're a Ron Paul Republican, which we understand pretty much means you're a libertarian, for sure, leading at least. And Ron Paul ran again as a Republican and was a Republican when he was in Congress. There's a lot of talk these days about we want to recreate this Ron Paul revolution. And there's a group within the Libertarian Party saying that. The big, no pun intended, elephant in the room is that Ron Paul ran as a Republican. There's people trying to do this within the Libertarian Party, and that's always kind of pushed to the wayside. Like that small detail is really a giant detail. Why do you have to run as a Republican? Why is that the way to go? I've got my own answers for this, but I'd like to hear yours.
Yeah, Ron Paul had the right idea, and so does Rand Paul and a lot of others. The system is very two-party, and to win, you have a infinitely better chance if you're with one of the major two parties. It's extremely hard. I mean, just look at it. We've been trying for many, many years, and it's not only very hard; it's pretty much impossible. No libertarian has won a major federal office like this. It's just very, very difficult to do. But with the existing two-party systems, you have these systems in place, and it's just a much easier road of it.
Do you get any pushback from the local Libertarian Party up in New Hampshire or any of the Free State people?
There's probably, I haven't really gotten pushback. There's probably some people who prefer the Libertarian Party. I love the Libertarians. I'm good friends with there's a Libertarian Senate candidate running in the same race. I'm good friends with him, and I agree with him on pretty much everything, or on many of the major issues. So we're in very unique times right now. So it's really, really important, I think, to win. And so I want to have a strategy to win, and I can win. It's absolutely a winnable thing. So that's what matters most at the end of the day. If we can have somebody who goes down to Washington, D.C. with the intentions that I have, which is to vote across the board for less government, less tyranny, less intervention, that's a huge victory for all libertarians, whether they say they're libertarian or Republican.
Right. Yeah. And the common sense thing, maybe it's pragmatic, I guess you could say. In my opinion, if you win the primary, well, the Libertarian candidate needs to withdraw from the race. I mean, that's ridiculous. He would then be siphoning votes. I mean, this is an old argument, obviously, but it would make sense for them to endorse you. Who knows that that's going to happen? I don't know. Let's talk about, from what I've read, you started off with your campaign funding it yourself with with earnings from Bitcoin. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the plan. I'm certainly planning on putting some money, or some Bitcoin into the campaign. And, I think that the campaign finance system is broken. I've learned a lot about it over the last few months. It's a very broken system with a lot of bad incentives. So if there was a way I could disrupt that, and I hope to run a very modern campaign, running it very much like a startup, using a lot of good tools. A lot of campaigns spend a lot of money, but they don't get anything for it. My opponent spent millions and millions of dollars so far, and she's continued to fall in the polls. There's a lot of consultants and a lot of big advertising machines and other incentives around these races that make a lot of the spending on ineffective. So not only would I like to raise a lot of money and put a lot of money in, but I'd like to spend it 5 or 10 times more effectively than anybody else.
I guess I want to ask a little bit about Bitcoin. I have a general grasp on it. I've read, I found Saifedean Amos's book, the Bitcoin Standard, to be very helpful because I came from the understanding I have with economics is basically an Austrian version of that. And so his book kind of spoke to me in that manner. Where do you see Bitcoin going? Is it the future? I know these are kind of generic questions, but you know a lot about it, and I know some about it, and I'm kind of curious. I don't know what the future of Bitcoin is. What does it offer And what are its downfalls? Where do you think we're headed with Bitcoin?
Well, Saifedean's books are great because he talks a lot about this kind of thing from a very Austrian standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And his first main book is called The Bitcoin Standard. The next one's called The Fiat Standard. But the Bitcoin Standard, it means, just like we used to have the gold standard. Well, now we could have the Bitcoin standard. What the gold standard is that you had money that the government said, okay, this is money and it's backed by gold. And gold is a real asset. Gold is a hard asset that is hard money and is more solid. It's not just something somebody can invent from thin air. Although they've tried for a long, long time. You can't invent gold from thin air, and you can't invent Bitcoins from thin air. You can invent fiat from thin air. So, Janet Yellen and the Elizabeth Warrens of the world can press a couple buttons. As Neil Kashkari from the Fed says, you press a button and it just prints. And in the crypto world, we call that a scam. In Bitcoin, you can't do that. You absolutely can't just print Bitcoin or counterfeit Bitcoin. And that's a fundamental difference. Just like it's very, very difficult to counterfeit gold. You can't make real gold from nothing. And so it's a matter of, what is money? Asking the big fundamental question, what is money and what makes money money? What makes it valuable? What makes it have value? And historically, throughout human history, humans have gravitated towards money that is scarce, limited in supply, fungible, hard money that you can't change, durable. There's a few other properties of money that make money valuable. And Bitcoin meets those properties really, really well. So I'm hoping that we'll see a world where we have a Bitcoin standard where people just, as many do, I have since 2013 and many others, recognize this as money. Say this is my form of money. This is the money that I'm going to use. And once enough people do that, it becomes money. It already has become money. It's a smaller global money now, but it's certainly growing and it's got a big spotlight on the global stage. So if that continues, that really can disrupt money itself. And we don't really need government in the business of creating and inventing money. That should be something the people can decide, and we can decide what is better money for us. So I'm very optimistic about Bitcoin in the future from that regard.
Are there still technological steps that need to be taken before? Let me ask it this way. Are there some downfalls still to Bitcoin in your mind as far as widespread use, let's say?
I mean, it's one of the factors of making money is being widely acceptable. Bitcoin is not that widely acceptable, although it's interesting because it's in some ways more acceptable than the dollar because it is just about every country in the world. There are Bitcoiners and there's Bitcoin exchanges, and you can convert it. So it's a global currency. It's much more global than any other currency. There's a lot of holders all over the world. You don't see people in countries typically buying currency of another country, but they do buy Bitcoin. Bitcoin has global money. There isn't really drawbacks, especially compared to the current system. There's things that are being developed. There's technology that will make it better user interfaces, better things like the Lightning Network, which makes it, move faster and it allows more transactions than the root code itself, things being built on top of Bitcoin. Bitcoin itself is pretty good. There's some fine tuning that, the code is always being improved, but they're usually pretty fine points. It's not like they're changing the number of coins or anything major like that. These changes are very minor and very technical, but maybe even more exciting is what's being built on top of that, what we call the second layer. All kinds of things that are being built to make Bitcoin work better, wallets and things like that, where you're not really messing with the Bitcoin code. You're just building something on top of it that can interact with that.
Mm-hmm. I love when these really cool companies offer to sponsor my show, and that's exactly what has happened with the Gold River Trading Company. It's only the best tea I've ever had in my life. The names alone will probably sell you guys on them. They've got the whole leaf 1776 American breakfast black tea. Then is my favorite, the gunpowder green tea, peach and apricot flavored, if you will. They've got peppermint green tea. Check this out. If you're stressed out in the evening and trying to mellow out, maybe even one of my episodes has raised your stress level, Gold River Trading Company has the chamomile herbal tea that's spearmint and lavender flavor, so you can kind of mellow out in the evenings. Give it a shot. Personally, I'm trying to quit drinking energy drinks in the afternoon, And now I've switched over to the gunpowder green tea for the pick-me-up. I can actually pronounce what's in this. It's tea instead of all those crazy ingredients in my energy drinks. So, since they are sponsoring this show, I've got you a promo code. It's BUCK, B-U-C-K, at checkout. That will get you 10% off of your order. If you don't love tea, they've also got cocoa, so check that out as well. That's at goldriverco.com. It's for Gold River Trading Company, goldriverco.com. Promo code BUCK, B-U-C-K, will get you 10% off of your order. Reward these guys for reaching out and sponsoring shows like mine. Thank you guys. Let's get back to the show. One of the silliest critiques of it, and I just want to get this out there because people listening are going to be thinking about it, I know they hear it, is it uses too much electricity to mine Bitcoins or something ridiculous like this. And of course, we all understand that the people making these accusations don't ever point out the Pentagon and the energy that these other things are using. What's your response to this? Well, Bitcoin, imagine the electricity it takes to make this stuff. What's your response to that?
Yeah, your first point is great. In Afghanistan, they have these tanks that were burning, I think it's 7 gallons of diesel a minute, and they leave them on all night, all day, forever. You talk to soldiers over there, they don't shut those tanks off. They're because it's a big process to shut it off and turn on. So they'll just leave them on. And, talk about waste, there's all kinds of waste in the current legacy system. And there's a lot of other drawbacks other than the energy waste. The current system uses a lot of energy. More importantly, it burns a lot of lives. Fiat kills. Fiat kills. Government money kills people. 300 million people have been killed by their own governments. And I'm not just talking about the United States. I'm talking about overall. This is a global phenomenon. Bitcoin is better money for the world. But fiat money, government money is a deadly and dangerous thing. Yes. And as far as the energy for Bitcoin, there's a lot of publicity about that, like it's this huge amount or whatever. But you want to look at where the energy is actually coming from. And one of the things that's very exciting about Bitcoin is that a lot of the energy actually powering these mines, it comes from stranded energy sources. Like you can set up a mining rig, you can bring it over in a shipping container by helicopter, and you can put it next to a volcano or oil flares. Oil flares is very, very wasteful. You've seen those things. These stacks, and they're literally burning fuel into the air because they don't want to overflow. So you can plug in a Bitcoin miner to that, and instead of burning that into the ozone, you can power the Bitcoin network. And you are burning energy. If there was a way to do it without burning energy, that would be great. But the fact that you're burning a real resource that has real value is part of the reason that makes Bitcoin valuable, part of the kind of proof of work behind making Bitcoin valuable. But overall, because of these stranded energy sources and the way that it works and renewables and everything, it's actually, believe it or not, it's actually better for the environment because it stables out the grid and it makes use of all these stranded energy sources that would otherwise be completely wasted.
You alluded to something that I think is huge when it comes to Bitcoin, and that's that fiat, you said, is deadly because war funding across the world, across this planet, is often done, at least when it comes to us, and I mean the U.S. government, not you and I specifically, thank God, but it's done through inflation and through printing of money. A lot of people, maybe, I don't know if they understand, if there was a war tax and that's what paid for these things, it would certainly be a lot more unpopular than it currently is. And a lot of the stuff's done through the ignorance of the population. Talk about that really quick, is how a Bitcoin system, essentially, if that's what you had, would lead to peace.
Yeah, it's not just peace globally. We printed money from thin air to go bomb brown people all over the world in the Obama administration and before and after. We've been at war for basically 50 years, bombing people all over the world. Millions of people have died, and thousands of Americans have died, and we've wasted trillions of dollars on this. And it's because of the broken system that allows these politicians to just press a button and say, oh, here's some new money and I can go and spend it on wars. And it's not just the wars, it's other violence like the for-profit prison system or the overall prison system in general. I mean, if I came to you and I say, hey, Buck, can I have $70,000? You say, what for? I say, well, I want to lock somebody in a cage because they had a forbidden plant. I don't think you'd give me the 70 grand. You're going to say, and now if they're a mass murderer or something, you might kick in, but people would be very, very much more resistant to put the money forth if they actually had to do it. But the politicians don't have that accountability. They don't have to come to you and say, hey, give me some money for some Stinger missiles so I can bomb some people in Afghanistan. A decade after bin Laden's been dead, or give me some money so that I can put some more people in prison. You wouldn't do it. The citizens wouldn't do it. They would resist those taxes. But the government can cheat. They get more money from printing it from thin air than they do from taxes. So the politicians can just skip us and say, oh, you don't need to agree or not. We're just going to print it whether you like it or not. And that is a tax. That's a tax that we can't really vote against and we can't fight. They just tax us by devaluing our currency.
The people that you're running against in the primary, let's say, not necessarily if you win it and then the Democrat, of course, but have they changed as far as the war issue goes? Because there is a trend of people on the right and within the Republican Party getting better over the years. And I think Trump had a lot to do with this, certainly rhetorically. They're getting better on the foreign policy issue. I will say the last 2 months, there's been a bit of a blip and maybe a fall back on your old bad habits with some Republicans. But are your opponents good on foreign policy, or are you the standout there?
I don't know too much because, like a lot of politicians, a lot of people, including my opponents, they're just sort of told what to say by consultants, and they go out of their way to say as little as possible. They don't want to take a stand, especially about something controversial like Ukraine or whatever. I'm different. I go right out there and say what I believe and say how I feel. So overall, I would guess that I'm probably a lot more peace focused. I've been against war. I've been a consistent war protester, regardless of the administration, for a long, long time. I protested Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan. These things have been absolute humanitarian and foreign policy disasters. So, I think we should follow the Constitution and stay out of these conflicts unless they pose a direct threat to our shores.
Who do you look up to in Congress, in the U.S. Congress right now? Who do you find appealing and admirable with what they're doing?
Yeah, I like Thomas Massie in Congress. In the Senate, Rand Paul. There's a handful of other people, Jim Jordan. There's many things I agree with Ted Cruz on. There's a few things that I disagree with. Thomas Massie's probably one of the ones that I agree with the most. Justin Amash was interesting. He became an independent, and I think he kind of went a little bit too far on the anti-Trump type of stuff. He changed a little bit, but definitely liberty-oriented people who understand. And obviously Ron Paul, of course, he's obviously been retired for some time, but ideologically he would be my very favorite and probably influenced me the most. He was the first one that I heard really talking about these principles of liberty back in must have been, early 2000s, 2006 or something like that I first started becoming a fan of Dr. Paul. But anybody who's in favor of freedom and, limited government. And I like to find, it's interesting as I've thought about this, I like to find common ground, even though I'll definitely poke fun at somebody like an Elizabeth Warren. But if I were to have the job, I would really try and find common ground, even with people that I am ideologically opposed to. One of my, I would enjoy trying to find something nice about, say, AOC, who I'm completely on the opposite end of the spectrum on, but I could still appreciate her social media game, for example. She's very good at reaching out to young people, and I'd like to, the optimist in me says I'd like to convince them that my ideas are right. It doesn't have to be this, maybe that's very naive, but I would like to try and convince some of these people, even people on the far left, that we share a lot of the same concerns. There's probably a lot of concerns that AOC and I have about corporate cronyism, and she's done some things anti-war, and I think she's probably against the for-profit prisons. We just see the solutions differently. But I'd like to try, for whatever it's worth, I would try and convince even people on the far end, other end of the spectrum that these ideas of freedom and liberty and the Constitution and these kind of principles, they work and they're good ideas.
I mean, you might have just answered the question I'm about to ask you, but you obviously don't have to run. I mean, it's a big endeavor. And I'll say I'm just considering myself a city council run. I'm considering that, people listening. I'm considering it. That's it right now. But in my small Texas town, and even that's like, I start thinking of the responsibility and, oh my God, the commitment, all of this stuff. Why are you wanting to run?
Yeah, it is a hard decision, and it was a hard decision, a hard process. But at the end of the day, I felt like I would regret it because of mainly where the country is right now. We're in very unprecedented times. These are special times. It's an unusual time, a fourth turning or an epoch shift, or the kind of times when the whole world changes, borders change, and systems change, economics change, power structures change. We're witnessing that before our eyes. And it's a big mess. And I'm afraid it's going to get better before it gets worse. And I think there's going to be some very key votes coming up. And I would be kicking myself if I knew that I had a chance of winning and I didn't try. And especially if somebody gets in there and makes a lot of bad votes and we end up, at war or something else. It's more important than ever. With everything the way it is and shakiness and kind of being broken down, it's important that we build back a system that works. I call it build back better, but not the way that the tyrants who invented that saying mean it. But we can build back better a world that's built on freedom and peace and our constitutional values and our true American values. So I feel like I have to. 2022 is a special time in our world and in our history, and every single one of us, not just me. I encourage you to run. I encourage everybody to run. We've got to take our country back. Everybody's got to go out there and run and vote and talk about these things. And we've just got to swing the pendulum the other way, because it's just too far towards the China model. The model of control and authoritarianism and censorship, and it's just against everything that we believe in as Americans. If we don't fight for it, our kids are going to be living under tyranny, and that's not going to happen.
Did you see a shift in the, let's say, outlook or general philosophy with Republican voters after Trump won, or maybe leading up to Trump? Did the Trump movement change how you saw Republicans, or maybe the way that they view things in general?
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of impact that Trump has had. It's hard to say exactly, how the Republican Party has changed. I mean, there's certainly a lot of the obvious things, kind of reactionary. One of his weaknesses was certainly, very polarizing. Even his biggest fans would admit that he's certainly very polarizing. And you can, in negotiations and diplomacy and stuff, you can become so polarizing that nobody will listen. And and that effect, I think it affected the left more than the right. I think that the left and the Democrats have been affected. The Republicans, a lot of them are kind of the same, but there's a lot of left people. They call it Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah.
Which it sounds funny, but I think it really is a real thing. I mean, you look at me, who is a very libertarian, kind of person, and pretty much every comment ever since I announced, there's somebody in there who's kind of like trying to tie me to Trump, like, oh yeah, but what about Orange Man this?
Yes.
Which is just, to me, sort of a little bit, derangement. There's many things I agree with President Trump on, but I'm not Trump. Anybody with an R next to their name is kind of lumped into this thing, and there's some people who believe that anybody with an R next to their name, because of this guilt by association, and they have been fooled into believing that the very, very, very worst about Trump. Some of these things were hoaxes. This idea that he said that neo-Nazis are fine people, for example. He never said that. If you look at the transcript, it's abundantly clear that was not at all. He specifically said, I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationals who should be condemned entirely. I mean, it was a very, very clear thing. But that was repeated by the President of the United States. Joe Biden repeated that. That was repeated by New York Times. So there's a lot of things that are in people's heads. And, in a case like that, if you really do believe that somebody is a racist or something like that, I can sympathize with those people. They just have really bad information, so they're believing something that's not true. But that has affected America, and it's unfortunate because it's degraded the kind of quality dialogue that we should be having. We have important issues to discuss, and everything is down to sound bites about you're a racist or something like that. Very low quality dialogue.
It is. I saw an interview with you. I believe it was on a more of a local station up in New Hampshire. And the guy is pretending to be calling down the middle, and he immediately asks you something about, do you think the election was stolen? And to me, it was clear he's trying to get you on a soundbite, and then so your opponents can play this and go, see, this guy's a kook or something like that. It was just pathetic, even at a local level, and I hope you don't know that guy. But what are some of your biggest issues that you're proud to run on, or that you find most important, or if someone's just talking to you at a cafe or something, what do you kind of lead with?
I think one of the biggest things is what's happened over the last 2 years. This tyranny, these mask mandates and vax passes and mandatory injections and locking down businesses and politicians who call themselves scientists deciding that your gym can be open or your restaurant has to be closed. That's absolutely unacceptable. That's not an America that I recognize. That's not an America that I've ever been familiar with, and it has no place in our country. These are policies from China. The idea of lockdowns was not in our emergency plans. There was nothing in any emergency plan, and they had all kinds of emergency plans, CDC and these other groups, dealing with things far, far more serious than COVID, international outbreaks of far more deadly pathogens. And nowhere in those plans did it say, oh, we're going to just shut down the whole country and tell people they can't work, and tell people they can't move, or tell people they need a pass to move around, that you need a government pass, or tell people that they must receive an injection. Those things are absolutely unconscionable. So that's one of the big points. And I think there's a lot of people who care a lot about that. That's one of the main motivations for me running, because we've got to do something about that. And then in addition to that, overall peace, like I said, peace on a foreign and a domestic level, by basically reducing government, reducing our interventionist attitude, and being more peaceful and voluntary oriented. And then the third thing is economics. I have an economic background and I understand money really well, and a lot of people in Washington don't. And they've made horrible decisions, and they keep printing money out of thin air, and they're wondering why we have high inflation. So those are probably the three big things.
I think the inflation's Putin's fault. That's what I was told. If you're looking for the world's best CBD products, look no further than PalomaVerdeCBD.com, a like-minded business out of San Antonio, Texas, owned by a great couple, Carlos and Vanessa. They love the show. They're supporting the show. They're giving you a discount when you buy these products because you like this show. We'll get there at the end here, but I've been ranting and raving about the sports cream for a long time. It is the best. I genuinely mean that. So if you're sore from workouts, go check out the CBD Menthol Sports Cream. If you're having trouble sleeping, they've got the Sleep Bundle CBD Pack. Maybe you've got pets like I do, like my two French bulldogs, Lux and George, that experience inflammation in some part of their spine or their back legs or whatever. Well, look no further. They've got the pet tinctures and the CBD dog chews over at PalomaVerdeCBD.com. Do you have anxiety at all? Well, there's CBD gummies over there. Are you stressed after a long day? There's CBD bath bombs over there. They've got this new CBD massage oil. Carlos, one of the owners of Paloma Verde, keeps asking me if he can use it on me. I've not allowed him to do so yet, but I suspect that their CBD massage oil is quite amazing. So go check that out. All things CBD related you will find at PalomaVerdeCBD.com. And since they support this show and they want to help the listeners of this show get a discount, I've got a promo code for you. It's BUCK, B-U-C-K. Just enter that at checkout. You will get 20% off of your order. That is BUCK, B-U-C-K, at checkout over at PalomaVerdeCBD.com. Tell them I sent you and enjoy the products. I know you will. Let's get back to the show. You tweeted, I don't have the exact tweet here, but something along the lines of, we are in a time of good versus evil. Can you get into that? And is that strictly this war strictly won by political means alone?
That's a really great question. And I think the answer is no, it probably won't be won politically. It'll be run spiritually. And there is a kind of a, crisis of faith and morality in our world right now. And again, led by, the China model, which is a faithless, godless, in my opinion, evil model. Mm-hmm. And there is good and evil, and it does matter. And we are in times where it is true good versus true evil. There are things that are evil. When you lock down people, mm-hmm. you send them to concentration camps like they're doing in China with the Uyghurs, based on their religion. tearing down churches, putting Muslims in concentration camps, telling them that they can't read the Quran, that President Xi is who they should have a picture of on the wall, telling Catholic priests that they can't have a Bible, putting people in a quarantine because they failed a test that doesn't even work for a virus that's nowhere near as deadly as we thought, and then murdering their pets while they're there. These are great evils, and they're not isolated evils. This isn't just Ted Bundy, one horrible murderer. This is big state evil with the Bible calls it powers and principalities.
Yes.
This is a new level of big evil, and we've got to recognize that these are not normal times, and it's totally unacceptable. This isn't the normal Republican versus Democrat kind of thing, or your party said this, or I said that, or I'm in favor of higher taxes or lower taxes. This is actually about the soul of humanity and who we are and what we believe about when is it okay to use force? When can you haul somebody away and put them in a camp and kill their pet? These are serious times and serious questions. And so I think that politics is part of it, but I think we need more than that, actually. And we have separation of church and state here, but I think that we need more spirituality. I think people, and that can mean different things to different people, depending on their religious or other beliefs, but we have to have something greater than this worship of the state, something greater than ourselves to say, what is right? What is wrong? When is it okay to kill another human? When is it okay to kill a child? When is it okay to kill somebody's pet? When is it okay to take somebody's faith away from them and lock them up? These are very serious things, very, very gravely serious things. And they're happening right now in our world. And if people don't stand up and do something about it, I think they're going to regret it. There was a lot of people when there was massive atrocities throughout history in World War II and other times, and they didn't say anything, and they regretted it. They regretted it the rest of their lives.
Yeah, now, you were basically alluding to China and what's going on there. It's awful, and it's not too many steps further than some of the things that we saw in 2020 and 2021. And one of the things I was, disappointed to see through those years is not only did people not say anything, a lot of people were cheerleading some of the horrible things and willing to essentially be workers of the state for free to help in the state. And, hey, that guy's out of his home. Look, they have 8 people at their house, and this person's not wearing a mask. And it's evil, that's for certain. And it was a lot more people were infected with it than I would have imagined. Certainly more people were infected with that evil than the things we were told that they were infected with. There was a hilarious hit piece on you already early, which is a good thing, I think. It means you're doing something right when these hit pieces come out. I cannot remember the publication, but it was some kind of smearing you with a Zelensky quote, or that you equated him with Bin Laden or something or other. Can you address that in case people see your name and go, oh, that's that guy that said this or that? What was that about?
Yeah, it was interesting. We were talking about foreign policy, and I said that we've made a lot of mistakes in foreign policy again and again by, meddling in the affairs of other nations. And we should be very, very cautious of that because we make mistakes and it's a bad idea. And I used the example, that we thought that Bin Laden was a hero. You watch the movie Charlie Wilson's War. Charlie Wilson, a member of Congress, was hailed as some kind of hero. Like, oh, what a great thing he did. He helped the Taliban. They were Taliban. Mujahideen. It's the same people. A lot of the same people became the Taliban. The idea that we could go over there to this place thousands of miles away and say, oh, we know what's going on. Let's give these people weapons. And we trained something like 12,000 bomb makers in Afghanistan. We built caves that the Taliban ended up hiding in later. We sent them RPGs. And now we just did it again. We just did it again just this year. If you look, and there's been articles and stuff that have tallied, they have now one of the largest militaries in the world, one of the best supplied militaries in the world. Thousands and thousands of Humvees and helicopters and attack ships and all kinds of things that we've basically given them, this time not so much intentionally, but just through the same kind of bad policy. So the comparison I made, we've got to be careful because Zelensky's hailed as a hero now, but so was Bin Laden at one point. I don't think there's much of a comparison. I do have bad things to say about Zelensky. There wasn't one of them. The other things is, I think people should have, and now what was interesting about that is the reaction. I had hundreds and hundreds of people who were extremely angry about this. And I could tell that it was purely emotion driven, because they're not saying anything of substance. They didn't even see the actual transcript where I'm talking about these broader foreign policy issues. They just saw the headline, Zelensky compared to Obama. People call me a traitor was a very common thing. Very interesting. When have you had somebody in America be accused of being a traitor because they say something about somebody in some other country? Mm-hmm. I mean, Zelensky's not an American.
Right.
I'm not running for office in Ukraine. And here's a guy that people don't really know anything about. Most people never even heard of him until 3-4 weeks ago. But they should have, because he was the subject of the phone call that President Trump was impeached for the first time. And he was also very much involved in this whole, thing with Biden and the prosecutor and Biden's son. And there's all kinds of shady things about Ukraine. So it shows the power of propaganda. It shows the power of the media, that they can make people this emotional. They care this much. I mean, there's people who will literally punch you. There's people who would want to punch me in the face, and several threatened to, just because I dared to speak out. And I didn't even really speak out. It wasn't like earlier, if they did their digging, they would have seen that earlier I had said something about the, one of the I think it was a foreign minister or something, it seemed to be, he was almost running a scam. They raised $50 million and they didn't say where it went. And, a lot of it went to these anonymous addresses and everything. Very, very shady stuff. And there's been a lot of outright lies that they've said. Does that mean that Putin's actions are good? Obviously not. I'm against Putin, of course. I'm a liberty person. I'm against big government. I'm against tyranny. I'm against violence in all forms. But it's a very, very naive view for people to take the ones that lied to us and were wrong about COVID for 2 years and say that just like that instantly, because they say that this guy's a hero, he's a hero. We don't know if he's a hero. I know that the politics are complex, and I don't know enough about it to make a judgment. And I also don't know a good place to get, really unvarnished information. So, we have to be very, very cautious about what we do. And, for the people that are angry about that kind of thing, they're probably not so much your listeners, but, those talking to those people, I'd say, think it through. I feel bad for them more than anything. I don't feel like fighting them. I just feel bad that people are that emotional, that you're that convinced. And why are you that convinced? Because you saw some clips, and because the news, who we know lies, and the politicians who we know lie, told you to believe a thing.
Yeah.
And it's not a coincidence that it was right during the trucker protest in Canada, and right as these inflation numbers are coming out, and right as the COVID data is coming out and the injection data is coming out, and these kind of things. It's all the more reason that they had incentive to kind of distract us and say, look over here at this thing.
Yes, no doubt. Really quick, I hadn't thought about this, asking you this, but you just mentioned that trucker thing in Canada. One of the things I've been trying to get across to my audience is there's people, boomers especially in my state in Texas. Well, the red line is when they come for my guns. When they come for my guns, if Beto's elected, he comes for my guns, blah, blah, blah. They don't have to come for your guns anymore. We just saw in Canada, they shut their bank accounts off and froze them. That is much more powerful than coming for your guns. They don't have to do that. They don't want a bloody war. They can just shut you down. With Bitcoin, if Bitcoin was our, let's say, means of purchasing and it was our money, is that something that can be, is it safe from actions like that?
It's a lot harder to seize it, especially if you have your own custody. There's many ways that you can do custody in a much more safe way now, where, in the old days we had to print it on a paper wallet and hope that, have a backup somewhere. And, there's much more advanced means now to keep it safe and keep it under your own control so that you don't have another third party. And there's no way that anybody, if you do it that way, there's no way that anybody can send a court order or anything else that can freeze your Bitcoin. They'd have to physically come to you and point a gun in your face and make you do it, which, don't put that out of the realm of possibility. It's been done all over the world many, many times throughout human history. But it is much, much harder to seize and harder to take, and it's a lot easier to secure. You can there's using these kind of methods, you can lock Bitcoin away. It makes it so it's very difficult for anybody to find it, and almost impossible for anybody to get it, and they can't do it through any technical means. So that's a really important step for freedom, particularly when we have on the other side governments including our own, pushing CBDCs and trying to, tie that with social credit scores. Again, the failed China model of tyranny, where government can say who has money and what your money is. And Canada's a great example of the slippery slope. Once you accept tyranny and you say like, oh, we can shut down somebody because they say something that we think is misinformation about COVID or the election or whatever, it just becomes all encompassing. And so basically Trudeau just says, well, they're criticizing me, so I'm going to take their money. And that's a very, very not only is that a bad power to have, that's incompatible with a free society. You can't have a ability for government to just take people's money, because people need their money. They need it to survive and to live. And so it's a very, very tyrannical thing. And if they do it in this way where it can be done all cleanly from some building in Washington, D.C., where somebody presses a button, they also don't have the accountability. They don't even have to see the people. They can just steal from them and take from them and abuse them, to a degree that we haven't really seen in history before. So it's very, very dangerous. And we have to resist these CBDCs and other any kind of efforts to, tie, national identity and movement passes and these kind of things.
Yeah, and for those listening who are saying, what did he say, CBDC? That's the central bank digital currency, and it's not only being concocted at the moment, I believe it's being put in motion, as far as I understand. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, they are here to stay, unfortunately. The especially unfortunate part is depending on the degree of ability to freeze it, and ability to track it, and ability to, shut it down. Mm-hmm. Because if you have digital money that anybody can just shut off at any time, that's a recipe for disaster. And we've seen it again and again, both big tech, the media, and the politicians. None of them can be trusted to give people freedom. And we have this ever slipping, definition of what's acceptable. You can't even talk. You could be a doctor and you're not even allowed to talk about COVID treatment. Right. And that's misinformation. You get shut down. What happens if you start taking these people's bank accounts? That's a very, chilling effect on free speech and on understanding reality and on understanding truth. You end up in a world where you have official truth and politicians are deciding what's true. That's never going to be a system that's workable.
Yes, and I'm about ready to get you out of here. I know you've got other time commitments. What do you think the status of the U.S. dollar will be in, let's say, 2028?
2028, we are in such times of radical change. If we talked in 2019 and I predicted this world now, you would have thought I was crazy. And I think it was February 2020, I tweeted, I was following this very carefully, and I was panicked, by the way. I thought we were all going to die. I was watching these videos of people dropping dead in the street. Mm-hmm. I became a prepper. I got a year's worth of toilet paper and, stocked up, and, I was deathly afraid of it. And so I was watching it very carefully at the time. I was never in favor of these lockdowns, by the way. I was fearful, but I adjusted my fear. But I said, I predict that the government's going to spend over $1 trillion on this. And people thought I was crazy. I said, $1 trillion for a flu? What are you nuts? I thought that was a big prediction, but as we know, it's been much, much more than that. And the effects are much greater. Ukraine is kind of a war that is a result of this COVID policy and all of these things. They balloon out to nth order effects. So anything is on the table. If we have we could have 2 years that are more impactful than the last two. So so by 2024, our world could change more than it's changed in the last 2 years. Yeah. So 2028 is a long, long way away. The optimist in me says, I hope that it's a Bitcoin standard. I hope that it's not so much that I hope that the U.S. dollar is weakened. The ultimate would be if the U.S. dollar, put Bitcoin in its reserves and it was backed by Bitcoin and was still the strongest currency in the world, but it was backed by the strongest money in the world. That would be my ultimate optimistic view. I hope and think, and this, what we see with everything from, Elon and Twitter to what we see with people like me running for office, I'm an optimist, and I believe that, the world rights itself. Nature fixes itself. You can have a lot of bad things pile on, but eventually, it's kind of like Atlas shrugging the world off. Eventually say, hey, enough's enough. We're going to set this right. And I do believe in our system. I'm very optimistic. So, that that side of me hopes that we're going to be on top of the world, that the United States is going to be in great shape. We're going to have a Bitcoin standard. We're going to have innovation. We're going to tear down some of these terrible regulations, everything from how do you start a business to securities laws to movement passes to heavy-handed governments, giant bureaucracies in the Department of Education and the TSA and everything else. We could see it all. We could see it all collapse. Everything is on the table. There's nothing that should be surprising. If you look at previous fourth turnings, you look at times like this in history, I mean, you're talking entire countries, borders change, countries that have been around for 300 years, boom, they're gone in 2 months and a new country's there. Businesses that have been around for 100 years, gone. And then a new business rises rapidly. Entire new markets, entire new systems. So anything's on the table. Anybody could end up leading. Our country could look completely unrecognizable, hopefully in a good way. It's already unrecognizable the last few years, but the optimist says hopefully that's gonna shed, and we're gonna right ourselves, and we're gonna write it, and we're gonna end up on the on the path forward.
All right, man. Plug away. Plug anything you'd like. If my audience likes what they heard from you, where can they find anything they need to about you and help your campaign,
Awesome.
By the way?
So it's Bruce Fenton, Fenton, and that's my website, brucefenton.com. It has all my positions on there, and that's the same handle for my social media. I'm very active on Twitter and a lot of these others, at least for now, until they can me or ban me or whatever. But Bruce Fenton's my name, and especially the best way to support me on this. I do a lot of business things, Watchdog Capital and stuff like that. But from the politics specifically, if you know people in New Hampshire, share my stuff with the people, talk to people, have conversations like this, and if you care about these issues. Consider voting and consider running for office wherever you are. Get involved. We've got to take our country back. We've got to have good people who are doing the right thing in Washington and everywhere else, state and federal, across the board.
Excellent. Bruce Fenton, thank you so much for being here, man. I'm glad we finally got to do this.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. I hope you guys found that to be a very good, fun, interesting interview. I had a good time doing it. It's nice to meet someone who's just good, who's good on so many things, and he's running for a position where he will have power. We want good elites. We want smart elites. We want good people in power. We don't have enough of them. And I think Bruce Fenton would make quite a good U.S. Senator. I'd be happy to see him up there. As for this show, if you want to support it, you're welcome to do so. I welcome your support. It's at patreon.com/counterflow. And let's see what else. Happy Holy Week to all of my Orthodox Christian listeners. This week is our Holy Week. Upcoming here on April 24th is our Easter, right? It's the Eastern Orthodox Easter. And so happy Holy Week to all of you guys listening. As for the show, counterflowpodcast.com. And until next week, you guys have a great one. See ya.
You get split in fucking half, like on the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Like the sound of the Counterflow podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.